Faith is certainly one of the most challenging things. And when I try and help people with healing, I focus a lot on surrender, because surrender is something that it's more practical, it's much easier to teach, and it's much easier to accomplish. Faith is just notoriously difficult. And it's funny because a lot of people who have spirituality or religion or whatever you want to call it in their lives, belief in God, they get very caught up in the belief. They believe completely in God and Jesus or whatever it is, and they believe. But it's so common to see people who believe in God completely show absolutely no faith whatsoever. And I think that's where, for me personally, I struggle with the idea of religion as it has become, the idea of organized religion, because it focuses a lot on the do's and don'ts. Be like this, be like that, be like that. For me, somebody who is doing all the right things, they're a kind person, they're forgiving, they're compassionate, they're patient, they're doing all the right things, and yet they're riddled with fear and anxiety. That just shows that there's no faith. And for me, the true test of your belief is your faith. It's not your conduct. I mean, your conduct is absolutely important, but our conduct is a work in progress. Nobody's perfect, and you're not going to be perfect all the time. And as soon as you think you are, well, then you're going to have a terrible, terrible fall. So that side of things is just a work in progress. But our faith is more like a switch. It's on or off, And for me, the other video I have, I'll leave a link, is that you should choose faith or surrender. So for somebody who chooses to believe in God or Great Spirit or, a benevolent universe, it's all in. It's all or nothing. It either is or it isn't. That's how I feel about it. It's either is or it isn't. So if you've chosen to believe in God, say, then you must believe completely, and there should be no fear, because if you have perfect faith, then you live in complete absence of fear. So what makes faith so very difficult? As I say, I know very few people who manifest a really strong faith. It's elusive, and in my own life, it's something that I take very seriously. I measure myself or check myself on my faith all the time, and I try to work on that as much as I can and remind myself to be aware of it. But it's really difficult. It's really, really difficult, and ignoring that is part of the problem. I think you need to face that difficulty head on and understand what it is inside yourself that fights against faith, that fear that overcomes it. And one of the things is that, and it's the same with inner peace, is we often measure our faith or our inner peace when things are going good. You're sitting on a mountaintop with a beautiful sunrise, and you think, oh, I have such great peace, or my faith is, restored, it's in order, I have faith. That's not faith. That's not faith at all. You don't need faith. If everything's going well, what do you have faith in? What is the faith of? It's of nothing. You don't need it. All you need is a shelong and a pina colada. That's all you need. So then often when things go wrong and you're facing a big drama or calamity in your life, then people often say, I'm having a crisis of faith, or my faith is being tested. It's not being tested. It's being revealed. That's your faith, right there. And it's the same with inner peace. Inner peace is what you discover when things are going wrong. That's your level of inner peace. So when things are hard and difficult, then you discover how much faith you have and how quickly you'll retreat away from that. And the issue is often that faith in our kind of modern world usually kind of gets a little bit cornered into matters of existential matters, so matters of spirit. So let's say somebody dies, a loved one dies, then that is usually something that we will address with faith. We can say to ourselves, well, it's God's plan and all of that. So it's easier to address faith in the context of something like life and death, where it's an existential thing. It's much harder when it's something like you can't make your bills at the end of the month, or you lose your job. Then, because we have this illusion of control in our world, your job, for instance, you worked hard and you studied and you then got that job. So when you lose the job, the last thing you go to is faith, because you believe that you created that. So now you feel responsible for having lost it. And so immediately we take God out of the equation and we're like, well, that's not God's business, that's my business, that's what I did, so I need to fix it. But that's not faith. You see, the faith requires that you believe that you only got that job, or were able to study, or were able to achieve that, or every single little piece in the puzzle that had to fall into place for you to get into that place was part of the plan. And that losing that job is also part of the plan, and that it will lead to something else. And we always look at things in a very small time frame, in a very condensed time frame. So we expect to see the woods for the trees straight away. We expect to see the rainbow at the end of everything, but like today. These things take time, and we won't know. I mean, I'm sure in your life there have been many times where something has gone wrong, and at the time you felt like it was a tragedy. But later in life, you realized that if it hadn't been for that, if that thing hadn't gone wrong, you would never have ultimately ended up where you're so grateful for having ended up. It made you go in a different direction. It made you meet somebody. It made you move town. It made you do something. And it was a terrible experience for you at the time, but ultimately you realized that there's no other way that you would have gotten to where you are, and you're grateful for that. So that's where the faith comes in, that when you're in that moment and things are going wrong, to have faith that ultimately that will be the outcome, that it will be something that you're grateful for. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult, and it takes practice, and it takes work. Every minute of every day you actually have to ask yourself, every 5 minutes, how's your faith? How's your faith? Are you worrying? If you're worrying, your faith has got issues. And you need to look at it. So yeah, faith is difficult, but it's an all or nothing thing, and the illusion that we're in control is part of the problem. So release yourself from the idea that you're in control. And another thing that makes faith very difficult is mistakes. So it's very much what I was saying just now, but it's slightly different. I had a journey once where I was worried about so many things that were going to come together, and I had to travel and I had to do COVID tests, and I wasn't sure how everything was going to work, and I was worried about it. And I was told, where's your faith? Why are you worried? Everything will work out, And I thought about that, and I thought, yeah, okay, maybe, but what if I make a mistake? What if I do the wrong thing? Then it can't work out, because I'm facing a choice. I'm either going to do one thing or I'm going to do the other. One of them is probably going to lead to one outcome, and the other choice is going to lead to a different outcome. And one outcome is going to be better than the other. And I have to make that choice. So how does that work in terms of faith? How can faith help me with that? I'm either going to make the right choice or the wrong choice, and I don't know which choice to make. So how can I have faith? How does faith get me through that choice? I always say faith is one thing, knowing is another. And the answer that I got in that moment, which was a game changer for me, is that your mistake was always part of the plan. It was always part of the plan. There's no such thing as a mistake. It was always known that you would make that mistake. And this goes into another lesson where I learned, where I made a mistake and I faced some serious consequences for it. But going through those consequences taught me something so profound and so extraordinary. I realized in that moment that there was no ways that I could have come to understand what it was that I understood by the end of that any other way. There was no way that I would have gotten that level of understanding. And so I realized that what I saw as a mistake, because it was absolutely a mistake, was actually the most important decision that I'd ever made in my life. And this happens often. You'll make a mistake and you learn so much from it. Sometimes just knowing which choice was the better one. And sitting on the fence and being paralyzed, unable to choose and unable to make any decisions in our lives because we're constantly worried about making mistakes. I think as children we get traumatized by the consequences of mistakes and we become allergic to making mistakes for the rest of our lives. But we're robbing ourselves of a beautiful education, because when you make those mistakes, and even if you make a mistake that hurts somebody, if you're honest and you go into that vulnerably with your heart, and you speak to that person and you say what you need to say, and you're vulnerable and you take responsibility for everything and you work through it and you heal it for them and you heal it for you, that can be one of the most incredible relationship affirming and bonding experiences that you can ever go through with a person. Far more so than just having coffee with them every Friday. That's life. It's dirty. It's messy. But it's remarkable how much you learn from that. And so it's not about labeling everything and saying right, wrong, good, bad. Everything is part of the journey. And so having that faith that you can't make a mistake, or that making a mistake would be wonderful, that it will still work out, no problem. And it's hard because we tug back and say, no, I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to go through that consequence. You don't know what that consequence is. You don't know where that ends up. So release yourself from the fear. Have faith. And just keep moving.